Dating in the Middle Ages was simple. Step 1, find someone alive. Step 2, hope they're not your cousin, or at least not a close one. There's no Tinder, no dating apps, and no just seeing where it goes. Here, love is a 3-player game between you, your parents, and the church. And you're the one with the least control. In the Middle Ages, marriage wasn't about love. It was about land, livestock, and making sure your bloodline didn't accidentally merge with the family next door, which, by the way, still happened. First, the church kept a meticulous record of who could marry who. And by meticulous, I mean they banned you from marrying anyone up to 7th cousins. Yes, 7th. That's 128 relatives you have to mentally cross off your medieval dating list. If you wanted to break that rule, you could apply for a dispensation, basically paying the church to look the other way. So yes, even in the 1300s, love already came with subscription fees. Your romantic options weren't just limited by family trees, they were limited by class. If you're a peasant, you marry another peasant. If you're a noble, you marry another noble. If you fall for someone in a different class, that's not called romance, it's called treason. And remember, marriages weren't just about 2 people, they were business contracts between entire families. If your love story didn't also involve land transfers or better political alliances, it wasn't worth telling. Parents were the real matchmakers. Your personal feelings, optional. The question wasn't, do you love them? It was, do they own a mill? And if you were unlucky, your parents' standards were low. Congratulations, you're now married to someone with a goat and an interesting skin condition. Forget romantic walks on the beach. Courtship often meant sitting in the same room, awkwardly supervised while trying not to make too much eye contact. Too much eye contact was basically second base. The one time you might get some freedom was during festivals or fairs. People would drink, dance, and flirt, all while pretending it was just a religious celebration. Think of it as the medieval version of speed dating, except with more mud and a higher chance of getting arrested for blasphemy. If you somehow manage to find someone, fall in love, and get engaged, congratulations. Now prepare for bans of marriage. The public announcement read at church for 3 consecutive Sundays to make sure no one objects. Basically, it was your neighbor's chance to ruin your love life. So dating in the Middle Ages wasn't really about finding the one. It was about finding someone your parents, your priest, and your landlord could tolerate, ideally before famine, war, or plague made you single again. Flirting in the Middle Ages was a dangerous game, not just for your heart, but for your actual safety. Do it wrong, and you could end up in a scandal, or on fire. And not in the good way. If you were a noble, you had rules for flirting. They called it courtly love. You'd write poems, send little gifts, maybe wear someone's favor during a tournament. It was romantic, refined, and absolutely exhausting. Half the time you weren't even allowed to be alone with the person. You'd pass love notes through servants who would then read them to everyone in the kitchen. For peasants, things were a little simpler. Flirting was less poetry and more, you looked at me while threshing grain, so I guess we're a thing now. If you wanted to impress someone, you might offer them some bread, share your ale, or let them use your good bucket. Yes, the good bucket. The safest place to flirt was at a festival or a market. It was noisy, crowded, and easier to talk without every old widow in the village whispering about it. Still, you had to keep it subtle. A lingering glance, a joke about how their cow looks healthier than everyone else's. Just don't One wrong word and suddenly you're accused of improper intentions and dragged in front of the local priest for a lecture on chastity. If you were feeling bold, you might try a gift. Something small, a ribbon, a sprig of herbs, maybe a carved wooden spoon. But remember, every gift had meaning. Give the wrong flower, and you might accidentally declare war on their family. Give nothing, and they might assume you hate them. Dating was a minefield, and everyone spoke in code. Eye contact was another thing. Today, locking eyes might be romantic. In the Middle Ages, staring too long could mean you want to marry them, you want to fight them, you've cursed them, and sometimes all three at once. For the upper classes, music was a popular way to flirt. Hire a troubadour to sing outside their window, or write your own song if you're feeling brave. Just keep in mind, if you're terrible, the whole village will know by morning. And medieval gossip spreads faster than the plague. And then there's the danger of flirting with the wrong person. Married? Off limits. Betrothed? Off limits. Noble and you're a peasant? Very off limits. If you ignored those rules, congratulations. You're now in a ballad about tragic love. And it ends with one or both of you dead. So the golden rule of medieval flirting was, keep it safe, keep it subtle, and keep it public. A shared joke at the market, a nod across the churchyard, an extra ladle of soup at the feast. Tiny, almost invisible gestures that let the other person know you're interested, without giving the priest, the neighbors, or the local gossip a reason to light a torch. Because in the Middle Ages, burning passion could become very literal very quickly. Courtship in the Middle Ages wasn't just about winning someone's heart. It was about winning over their entire family, and in many cases their boss, their priest, and half the village. If you thought meeting the parents today was stressful, try doing it when the parents' opinion could literally determine whether the marriage happens at all. You're not just being judged on your personality. They're evaluating your land, your income, your reputation, and whether your family has any embarrassing scandals. And yes, once accused of sheep theft counts as a scandal even if you were acquitted. First impressions mattered. If you were noble, you'd arrive well-dressed, with a gift, maybe wine, fine cloth, or something exotic like spices. If you were a peasant, a gift might be a jug of ale, fresh bread, or a fat chicken. The key was to show you weren't poor without looking like you were trying too hard. But don't forget, you weren't just courting a person, you were courting their entire network. Win over the family, and suddenly the gossipy aunt becomes your biggest supporter. Annoy them, and she'll tell everyone you have the devil's eyebrows, or a suspicious way of walking. For nobles, courtship could turn into politics very quickly. Your potential spouse might be a bargaining chip in a treaty or a way to gain land. Romance came second, sometimes third, after livestock negotiations. You might have to impress not only the parents, but also a distant relative who holds the title to some valuable farmland. For peasants, things were simpler but still political. You might need to convince the village elders or the landlord that your marriage made sense. Too many mouths to feed? They might veto the match. Yes, in the Middle Ages, even the landlord could say, "Actually, no, you can't marry her. We need you to marry someone from the next village to settle a dispute about sheep." Rival suitors were another problem. In a small community, there was a good chance you weren't the only one interested. And in an age when honor mattered, rivalries could get messy fast. Sometimes that meant duels. Sometimes that meant spreading rumors about your competitor's unholy rash. Either way, someone was going to the priest to complain. Courtship courtship often involved gifts, but these were carefully chosen to send a message. A fine belt could mean admiration. A loaf of bread might signal you were thinking of them. A live goose? That could mean marry me, or I had a spare goose. You've survived the flirting, the courtship, and the endless parental inspections. Now it's time to seal the deal. In the Middle Ages, that meant a wedding. And a wedding meant rules. A lot of rules. First, you had to get through the banns of marriage. The public announcements made at church 3 Sundays in a row. This was the community's chance to object. If nobody shouted, he's already married, or she owes me 2 pigs, then you were clear to proceed. Mostly, the wedding day itself depended on your status. For nobles, it was a grand affair. Fine clothes, feasting, music, and enough wine to make everyone forget the political negotiations that got you here. For the peasants, it was more practical. Best tunic, a borrowed feast table, and a few jugs of ale. But no matter your class, everyone in the village would show up, because free food is free food. The church ceremony was non-negotiable. Marriage was a holy sacrament, and skipping it was basically declaring yourself an outlaw couple. You'd exchange vows, the priest would bless the union, and everyone would pretend to ignore that half the guests were already tipsy. And then came the bedding ceremony. Today, newlyweds might enjoy a private romantic night together. In the Middle Ages, privacy was a rare luxury. In some places, it was tradition for friends and family to escort the couple to bed. Sometimes literally watching them get in to prove the marriage was official. Yes, that's as awkward as it sounds. After the wedding came the feast, a test of endurance as much as celebration. Food, music, dancing, and an open invitation for every neighbor, distant cousin, and village drunk. The bigger the feast, the better the bragging rights. If you could afford meat, you were practically royalty for the day. If you couldn't, you hoped the bread was fresh and the ale was strong enough to distract people. Marriage in the Middle Ages wasn't exactly a fairy tale. For nobles, it was about alliances and heirs. For peasants, it was about survival. Love was nice if you had it, but it wasn't required. You worked together, raised children, and hoped your spouse didn't develop any mysterious illnesses or debts. Legal rights varied, but generally the husband was the head of the household. Wives managed the home, the children, and often a large part of the farm work. If you were lucky, your marriage was a partnership. If you weren't, well, divorce wasn't really an option. The best you could hope for was an annulment, and that required the church's approval and a very creative excuse. Of course, life was short. War, plague, famine, and random acts of medieval life meant you could be single again before the year was out. Widowhood was common and remarriage happened fast, not because people were desperate for love, but because survival often meant finding a new partner quickly. So after all the rules, politics, and awkward traditions, what was medieval marriage really about? It was about finding someone you could share bread with, argue about goats with, and survive winter with. If you managed that, you'd beaten the odds. If not, well, at least the feast was fun.